Welcome, everybody, to the Batard and Friends NBA Free Agency Special featuring Amin Elhassan, Senior NBA. Are you jealous that I just labeled Tom the Senior NBA Analyst for Metal Arc Media?
Does that make me junior? I don't know what that means.
Junior. Assistant to the Senior NBA Analyst, Tom Haberstroh for Metal Arc Media. And Dan Batard is expected to be here, but got a blip on the Wi-Fi, or maybe he's just pouring over Lonzo Ball news right now. So it's just Amin Elhassan and Mike Ryan for now, as Tom Haberstroh is in the mountains of Tennessee and has spotty internet. But there's already plenty to react to here, Amin. A lot of shocking things have already went down. Now, we're still awaiting the official news of the sign and trade that is expected between Toronto and Miami. But the big news here is Lonzo Ball to the Chicago Bulls.
Oh, I thought you meant Doug Christie, assistant coach to the Kings. That was a big one.
Boban has re-signed with Dallas, and $72 million for Tim Hardaway Jr. Meanwhile, Mike Conley gets less than that at $68 million.
3-year deal,
though. Okay, so more money annually, but still, that's a bit of a discount for Mike Conley Jr. and lower than what many people expected.
Yeah, especially I would say we look at Mike Conley, knowing that the point guard market is not that deep. Lonzo just went. We know Chris Paul's probably going to stay in Phoenix. We know that Kyle Lowry is probably going to go to Miami. So if you're the Knicks with a lot of money and a need for a point guard, if I was Mike Conley, I think I would have played. I'm not saying I would have gone to New York, but I would have played that Knicks thread a little harder to say, hey, give me up that money a little bit.
Tom, I'm going to bring you in here because it wouldn't be a Batard and Friends NBA watch party without spotty internet with Tom Haberstroh. So far, one real surprise early on, and that's the Lonzo Ball move. It's been rumored that David Griffin, and you confirmed this on our show, saying he's clearing the way for a big-time max contract player to put alongside Zion Williamson. They decide to let Lonzo Ball go. A young Lonzo Ball that has made some improvements in his game. This is a surprising move. Your takeaway.
Yeah, vacation is going very, very well here. Lonzo Ball is switching teams. I'm excited that someone's switching teams. Besides Kyle Lowry, I was kind of bummed out with the first news that's trickling in. We got Mike Conley going back to his team. It just seemed like Chris Paul's going back. Kawhi might be going back. And finally, we get some movement here. Lonzo Ball going to Chicago. Interesting because we know that Zion Williamson is very much wanting Lonzo Ball in New Orleans. And so not that you need to bend over backwards to make Zion Williamson happy, but Lonzo Ball going to Chicago with Arturas Kornišovas really wanting to get into the playoffs next year. Zach LaVine, Lonzo Ball, that's a really good backcourt. Not so much playmaking. I think they need a true point guard with Zach LaVine there. But with New Orleans having no Lonzo Ball there, they have already traded Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams. You're looking at Zion Williamson going to David Griffin and saying, hey, man, like I already told you I wanted Lonzo Ball to be here. What's the end game here? We're going to see what Chicago's going to send back in a sign and trade for Lonzo Ball. But it is very clear to me that David Griffin is managing this situation without feeling like he needs to do everything that Zion Williamson says.
Wait a second, Tom. Hold on. It's confirmed here that Garrett Temple is going to the Pelicans. 3-year deal, $5 million a year. The first 2 years are guaranteed. If that doesn't get Zion up out of his seat saying, woo, playoffs, here we come, I don't know what will.
I mean, when was the last time a number one pick, or at least a max player, obvious Zion Williamson, decided to not take the first extension off their rookie scale contract? Because that's what we're looking at here, right? Like the end game here with David Griffin and Zion Williamson and the New Orleans Pelicans is, oh, you're really going to turn down that money? The first extension on your rookie scale contract? Nobody does that. Are we seeing that right now with Zion Williamson and me?
It gets better. Not just Garrett Temple, Tomasz Satoransky, and a second-round pick, all going to New Orleans for Lonzo Ball.
Second-round pick. Oh, all right. I love this. Hey, Can we get something more? Can we get something more? Garrett Temple, Shadaransky. What do you got for me? How about a second round pick? Done. Let's do it.
And these and this lucky hat.
We'll talk about why the Bulls really want to make a push for the playoffs and be a low-seeded team in a second, but we do have some unexpected news. Jimmy Butler has agreed to a max extension, and while we have a bunch of analysts, we welcome in Dan Le Batard, who is plugged into the Miami Heat organization, and for the purposes of this segment, is our front office insider. There's all sorts of talk about Duncan Robinson and Kyle Lowry, the pipe dream of Kawhi Leonard, and there's DeMar DeRozan floating out there. But a surprise to lead off the day's news for the Miami Heat, Jimmy Butler has agreed to a max extension worth $184 million. A bit of a surprise, Dan.
You said that I was plugged into the Miami Heat. I don't know if I'm plugged in correctly to my computer, so my audio might not be great. So what we have right now in terms of a roundtable are a person who is a functioning alcoholic in our last IG Live as our basketball insider.
I'm glad you specified, because that could have been anybody here.
A guy who predicted and wrote something today that was supposed to run tomorrow about the intrigue of next free agent season when Steph Curry becomes a free agent. He's not going to become, because he just signed a 4-year deal. And a guy who's closest to the action when he gets a poop emoji that tells him shit is going down. That makes me the front office insider. And what I would say to you is what you've seen here happen at the very beginning of free agency is the ego kiss of this has all been worked out. Whatever's going to happen today has already been largely worked out. And the first order of business is to show everybody this is Jimmy Butler's team for 4 years. And it's going to be a go all out situation for 4 years, whatever's left of Riley and Mickey Arison as the top guys in this organization. They're going for it for now, the way that they did back when they get Dan Marley as the last piece. I don't know if it's the best move, but it starts with Jimmy Butler, and symbolically it starts with Jimmy Butler before.
All right. Well, let me pivot over to Amin. That's our plugged in NBA insider who is barely plugged into his internet. Amin, you're not fooling me. I know that I know that you were fake freezing there. There is an interesting conversation about the stats that Jimmy Butler posted this season, where his career might be headed. But in the meantime, let's get your initial takeaway from this deal before we bring in numbers and Tom Haberstroh to the discussion, Amin.
Oh, well, I mean, I think, look, 2 years ago when the Heat first expressed their interest in Jimmy Butler, I said to you guys that you can't say I want to get the second superstar if I don't have the first one already here. Right? You can't say, oh, no, not you. I'm waiting for another first superstar to attract the second superstar. So that was I thought was a very important piece for them to land. And they did. And they signed him to a 4-year deal. Now, he still has one more year on this deal, which is this upcoming season. Then the year after that is a player option. And so what they've done here is they've worked out a 4-year extension on top of that that'll keep him in a Miami Heat uniform for a lot of money for a long time. That's a pretty ballsy move, because 2 years ago I felt like, this guy's in his prime. So it's no guarantee that he'll fall out of it or he'll be terrible by the end of this contract. This one, on the other hand, has the opportunity for him to be terrible by the end of this contract. And so you're hoping against hope that the stability of Jimmy staying there is going to attract more talent to come play there. And I'm thinking it's got to be bigger than Kyle Lowry. Not saying that Kyle Lowry is not the one who's coming now. It's just you did this. You got to be hoping that something else is coming down the pike, and you need to.
I mean, is it hoping? Once you've done this, is it hoping? Don't you believe that whatever the plan is for the Miami Heat that's going to reveal itself here shortly, that's going to have been in the work for months? You've worked in front offices before. You know this stuff doesn't come together last minute, that the agents have been working on this for weeks and months. This is not happening right now. We're just reporting and covering it right now.
Absolutely. But Dan, there's always an element of hope to every plan, right? And then we hope this is going to happen, because you don't know. You really don't know. But the reality is, I mean, either way, whatever the next step of your plan is, sticking with Jimmy Butler through perhaps 2027, that's a little rich for my blood.
Tom, are you surprised? Mike said this is a surprising move. I had read for a while that all this stuff was going to come up. And I'm assuming, Mike, that Duncan Robinson's not going to go into a bidding war right now, that they know what's going on with Duncan Robinson. And my guess is that they're getting him to stretch the floor because they're going to be somewhat limited there with Jimmy Butler not able to shoot. His shooting is not likely to get better over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, Dan, this tells me that this extension here has nothing to do with what happened last season. It has everything to do with what happened in the bubble and what he did in the bubble. Because if you look at the recent returns on Jimmy Butler, it is not, hey, the first thing we do in free agency is make sure we sign a 4-year extension on this guy, because he's turning 32 in September and he just shot 29% in the first round series against the Milwaukee Bucks in a sweep. And we kept saying, hey, Jimmy Butler's just saving his time for the playoffs and they're going to go on another run. And it was nothing like that. So nothing what happened in the playoffs, Dan, says this guy, we need to sign long-term. So to me, this is more sentiment. This is more big picture.
Sentiment.
We want to pay this guy back for what he did.
You think Pat Riley's doing sentiment? You think
he gave Hassan Whiteside $100 million contract?
As he's trading away Goran Dragic, you were arguing sentiment.
I'm arguing that that Jimmy Butler represents something to the Miami Heat organization that Goran Dragic doesn't. Jimmy Butler walked down to Miami and said, I want to sign here, right? He did. And when no one thought that he was going to go to Miami and people thought he was going to go to Philly on a max contract after they had that little playoff run there, and he went down to Miami. And I think what Pat Riley wants to show here is that Jimmy Butler is a Heat lifer, and we're going to double down on him just like we did with other players in this organization that showed they want to be here.
Tom,
and I don't know if that's a wise thing. Amin alluded to it earlier. 32 years old in September. In 1 month, he's going to be 32. And then they just signed him to a 4-year extension after he's going to be, 33, starting at 33 years old. To me, you're not making that extension based on your production that you have seen from this guy. To me, you're saying, I want to attract other free agents to bring here based on what Jimmy Butler did. And I think it's more about off-court stuff than it is on-court, because the recent on-court stuff is not pretty.
Can I stop you just for a second? The recent on-court stuff is 12 months ago they were in the finals, and I would argue...
It's not recent. That's 12 months ago.
It's pretty
It's technically 2 seasons ago.
Okay, but it's pretty recent. Understood. There's a lot of mileage on that. But I mean, and you could speak to this as a front office guy. There's simply no way that Pat Riley is paying for past performance. That contract is for future performance. You can question it. You can say it's idiotic. You can question it at 37 years old that Jimmy Butler will be spent as a player. But there's just simply no way that Pat Riley is paying for past performance. Since when does he do that?
Man, Dan, look, I'm not saying that this is in his wheelhouse of doing it in the past, but it's hard to argue what Tom is saying. There's nobody here who sits here thinks that Jimmy Butler is even going to be able to sustain what he's been for the next 5 years. That's a lot. That's a lot. Hey, you got to sit here and admit, man, that's a lot to project forward.
But I would question it unless it's locked to a bunch of other things. Like, here's our all-in on the next 2 or 3 years, that it's one of these baseball contracts, that it's the idea that I can move any of these contracts at the end when they become 36 and 37 years old. So basically what I'm doing is I'm paying Jimmy Butler for the next 2 years, and we're all in on the next 2 years.
Let me get some news in here real quick before we pick that conversation up right there. But clarification on an earlier report, which here's another storyline of NBA free agency. It's the battle between Woj and Shams. And Shams had early 10-8 rounds, but he did get a number wrong in the Mike Conley deal. We said 68. That was the initial report. Woj has clarified that number is 72. But Woj hasn't been dominated this early on in an NBA free agency quite like this, Amin.
That's what we've got to be covering. We have to be explaining to the audience that the way that we're doing this live breaking coverage is that we are simply checking our Twitter accounts and seeing what it is that Shams says and what it is that Woj says. That's the kind of expertise we give you around here, including an insider who wrote today how 2022 is going to be more interested in free agency because Steph Curry becomes a free agent, which he now will not become, minutes after he said this and did a nice essay.
Is that done?
Steph Curry. Well, what happened there? You're questioning the veracity of the news source, Mark Stein, who actually has sources. We've got one of his accounts open today. He doesn't have ours open today.
No, Mark Stein didn't report that it's done, Dan. You're the journalist here. It's not done. He said they are expecting to sign Stephen Curry to a 4-year extension. And if we're real journalists here, we're not going to run with that Tom. Here, and we're going to support our own colleagues here and say, hey, Tom, you wrote a really interesting essay about how Stephen Curry could hold a lot more leverage in these talks. But no, we're going to go jump all over Tom Haberstroh on his vacation and say, Tom, you were wrong. Thank you for your work.
Before we came on to the air here, Mike Ryan had a giant smile on his face. And I asked him, why are you laughing as if the smile is bursting through the skin on your face? He's like, because of how dumb Tom looks, because of the timing of how quickly it was reported.
It was supposed to be this nice, cool, thought-provoking piece that really just stoked the fires on a storyline no one was talking about. And if it ended up being wrong, who cares? It's a year from now. That thing aged in hours. It was almost as if he listened to it and said, this is bullshit.
Have not heard it yet. There are people who are still waiting to hear it that will not know how wrong it is. If the information will get here quicker than that will in their lives. God almighty, that's funny.
Tom,
Dan, last. Amin, help me out here. Wait, Amin, help me out here. Have you seen it, Amin, that Stephen Curry is signing an extension?
No, I saw someone cite a report from Mark Stein and kind of made the leap from saying that it's happened or it's expected to happen to it's happening.
Yeah, but even if we want to play the semantics game,
no, but we didn't just 10 seconds ago talk about the reporters getting a number wrong. We didn't talk about how a national reporter got a report wrong. So no, okay, continue. I'm not saying Mark Stein is wrong. There's an expectation that Stephen Curry will sign, but it hasn't been done.
We're not saying Mark Stein is wrong. We're saying you're wrong. Nobody
we're saying you're wrong. Because even if you want to play the semantics game of expected, the whole premise of the op-ed was, hey, everyone's expecting this. Here's the unexpected. And now he's expected to join.
It was the first expected, according to Mark Stein. After you read your essay, the first expected was Steph Curry is expected to re-sign in Golden State.
While you were arguing, expect the unexpected.
That's a lot of loyalty by Stephen Curry to sign a 4-year, $250 million extension after 2 teenagers were drafted and after Joe Lake was essentially the owner was saying, hey, man, it's not on Steve Kerr. It's not on anybody else but you, Steph and Draymond. And that, to me, is an interesting dynamic, and I'm glad I wrote it, and I'm proud of the work I do at Batard Show, Dan.
There you go. Attaboy.
He's still shaking his head.
I mean, in Tom's defense, we did see Kyrie Irving tell an arena full of people that he was going to be re-signing with the Boston Celtics. They all expected it, and then he ended up not. So let's talk a little bit about your specialty, which is not NBA rumor mill. It's actual numbers. And one last bit on Jimmy Butler, because those metrics from the further away from the hoop were indeed going down a little bit more. There is a scary trend with Tom Thibodeau players as well. A lot of mileage on that body. What is the most concerning aspect of Jimmy Butler's game as he continues to age?
Well, yeah, it's the fact that all of those miles are not going to turn up like year 1. It's going to be in year 3. And when the Jimmy Butler signing happened, or the sign and trade in Miami came up, a lot of executives were telling me, this means that the Miami Heat are going for this 2-year window here, because after 2 years, I'm not banking that Jimmy Butler is going to be an all-NBA player. So you're doing this extension against what I think a lot of people in the league would argue for, is that Jimmy Butler is not going to be an all-NBA player for the next, 6 years, 5 years? So you're looking at a guy who's going to go against the careers of Joakim Noah, Luol Deng, Derrick Rose, and expect that Jimmy Butler is going to be the one to go all against that. I think when you're Jimmy Butler, you're being able to look at the Miami Heat and say, I need someone else, because you saw what happened against the Milwaukee Bucks. I can't run everything on this team. I need somebody else. And Kyle Lowry, his buddy, might be that guy. But that guy, he's 35. So this is going to be a 1-year, 2-year shot with Giannis dropping a 50-piece in a clinching game in the finals. Do you expect the Miami Heat to beat that team right now?
Let's talk for a second about the idea of short-sightedness and the idea of Pat Riley and Mickey Arison need to win now. And the idea that you're basically paying Jimmy Butler double the worth because you're trying to squeeze 2.5, 3 years out of him. This is one of those baseball contracts, is it not? Like Miguel Cabrera, those are backloaded contracts that allow you to eat the last 2 or 3 years or trade it or try and figure out a way to get out of a bad contract. Think about 2 or 3 years from now, 2 or 3 years from now. It's right now. It's all in. And it's all in with Kyle Lowry, Bam, and Jimmy, and whatever else you can get against Kyrie and Durant and Harden, and that's probably not good enough.
Yeah, I think that's the fear, is that you're committing a lot of money to something that, forget about not gonna be worth it in 5 years or 4 years. Maybe this incarnation isn't gonna be something you're in love with right now in terms of success, of wins. Again, I'm not saying that Jimmy Butler's not good or Kyle Lowry's not good. I just question how much I can put eggs in this basket for something that's not even the nicest basket, right? This wasn't the signing of, I don't know who I guess Chris Paul, but Chris Paul's old too. This isn't the signing of someone who is like elite of elite of elite. Kyle Lowry is really goddamn good. Don't get it twisted. Jimmy Butler is really goddamn good. But is Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, Duncan Robinson, Bam Adebayo, and pick whoever your fifth guy is, that's your championship core? I mean, is that? And I'm not trying to be funny.
Mike,
is that even division championship core?
Mike, how do you feel about this? The fact that you've got Amin and Tom Haberstroh right out of the gate. The Miami Heat are making what he's calling a sentimental gesture, a symbolic gesture. I'm telling you, it's symbolic to open the bidding with, he's our max player, he's our star. And so you feel how about it that these guys, you're used to in free agency, these guys celebrate what the Heat are doing. Both of them are questioning it.
I think they're right to question it if the master plan ends up being the best player you get this offseason is Kyle Lowry. And I think you can, if we're hanging our hat on the hopes of Kawhi Leonard switching teams off an ACL injury, there are a lot of questions here. Those are players that are long in the tooth. It seems like a flawed roster construction. There are some pieces that can help that are on the team, not just Duncan Robinson when it comes to spacing the floor, but what is the cap number of Duncan Robinson? Victor Oladipo. I know we're talking a lot about DeMar DeRozan, but Victor Oladipo is somebody they gave up capital for, even though that capital is now on its way to Detroit for 3 years, $37 million. But Victor Oladipo can also help this team if he signs a 1-year prove-it deal. And when we saw him with the Miami Heat, though limited, Victor Oladipo did have a helpful dynamic to this team that they were sorely lacking.
Yeah, but again, now we're relying on the guy who's been really hurt for the last 3 years to suddenly be fine. Now, the good news is, because he's been hurt for the last 3 years, the Heat should not be paying him more than minimum. They should give him a 2-year deal, minimum, player option on the second year. Hey, buddy, if you're great, then we want you to opt out and be super healthy and go get the money you're truly owed. But the reality is, hurt Victor Oladipo, old Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler run down and also can't shoot. I mean, you're starting to build this thing kind of like on a House of Cards foundation.
We'll get to some of the other storylines going on right now. I do find it funny that fewer players have moved teams then we've seen numbers attached to this Mike Conley deal. Now Mark Stein is clarifying the Woj clarification. We've seen 68, 72, and now in the neighborhood of $75 million. That's according to Mark Stein. So more movement on this contract of Mike Conley Jr. than actual player movement so far.
For all the talk of Miami, would you guys not argue that Utah is better? Or is Utah not better because you can take their defensive player of the year off the court once the playoffs start?
We talking about Kyle Lowry on the Miami
I'm
Heat?
talking about Utah, just what Utah is going to look like next season, what Miami's going to look like next season.
Utah.
I take Utah in this, but let's also point out what happened there. So Mike Conley signs for a deal that is at $68 million. I mean, you're good at deciphering this. And then two other national reporters are clarifying the money of the deal. That's the agent for Mike Conley being very upset, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's no. My guy didn't get 68. Bullshit. That's bullshit. My guy got 72 and a half. Because
then there's bonuses in that contract. He's 75. Yeah.
I got an agent
So-
once. I had a long talking to from an agent because of something like that, where I said,
All the information is coming from the agents, right? All of these, when you
No, actually, Amin, you could speak to, because this is an interesting aspect of NBA free agency day, is who's actually the source on a lot of these things. So what is usually the dynamic there, Amin?
well, I mean, agents obviously always want to get out there and get that number high, but when you see a number that's reported and then, as Tom said, it's corrected, it's because someone with the team said this is what we signed him for, because they want to say, look at us, we did such a great job of negotiating, we got him at less than what he's worth. And then the agent comes and says, no, that's not true, you got him at this. And the reality is neither of them are right, because it's somewhere in the middle. There's probably incentives in there. Sometimes incentives are really easy. If he plays 60 games, he gets $500,000. If we make it to the playoffs, he gets $500,000. Sometimes the incentives are really hard. He has to average 40% from three on 3 attempts at least a game, or 4 attempts at least a game.
Mike, is Shams taking over Woj? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I forgive me. You guys now got me interested in this undercurrent war between Shams and Woj. And
Well, you could, in what Amin was telling us there, you could kind of deduce that Shams got his source from the Utah Jazz, and then the agent for Mike Conley reached out to Adrian Wojnarowski.
Shams winning so far. The first 30 minutes of free agency is Shams winning.
I can tell you that Tom Haberstroh was not. He was a very early loser in this entire process, and he somehow lost on the 2022 offseason a year ahead of time.
He's first on that.
I'm still scrolling for that
Do you want to do
Steph Curry's
a dunk tank?
I'm not seeing it.
Oh,
Well, I saw Cameron Payne has agreed to re-sign with the Suns for 3 years. What? Wait, they're willing to report on a campaign deal, but not Stephen Curry, who was the scoring title leader. If that deal was done, I think we would have heard about it.
Hold on tight.
Mark Stein is reporting the Heat are expected to get a commitment from Duncan Robinson. Miami Heat Beat has reported a package for Lowry, and that package is Goran Dragic, Precious, and a future second-round pick to Toronto, according to Miami Heat Beat. So it is not just Shams and Woj, but the local feeders here are fighting and getting their own sources on this.
The numbers say that Duncan Robinson, based on his numbers and the past contracts, ProFitX is a AI projection company that does NBA free agency deals. Based on his numbers, he should get somewhere around $15.7 million. John Hollinger says that Duncan Robinson should get $23 million annually based on his numbers. So average that out, it's about a $20 million annual contract for Duncan Robinson. Dan, do you feel good about giving $20 million a year to Duncan Robinson around this core?
We are a half hour into free agency, and I'm going to defer to our alleged experts on this. When you ask me for immediate analysis on whether a contract is good or not, I cannot give you smart analysis unless I know everything else that it is tied to. So if you're telling me that you need to sign Duncan Robinson in order to have the exact spacing that you need on a court so as not to be undercut by the fact that Jimmy Butler can't shoot and whatever it is you guys were talking about with DeRozan earlier, although now people are talking about mutual interest from the New York Knicks, I can't say what something is until you tell me what else it's attached to, because I think they can form a Duncan Robinson out of a lot of different shooters, because I just saw them form it out of Duncan Robinson. So you guys helped me on this. No, I don't think that that's worth that, but it's worth that to them. And you guys are questioning everything that's worth what to them, because you've just ripped all over what Jimmy Butler is doing already. So by itself, I'd say, no, you don't pay that much for that. But what else is it tied to? And what else does it make them look like offensively?
Oh, look at that. TJ McConnell, 4 years, $35 million. By the way, I'd like to point out, based on that, Cameron Payne, you left money on the table, buddy. You left money on the table. He's absolutely shouldn't have been anything less than what TJ McConnell got. It's a shame that he jumped the gun, but again, I get it. You know, they offer you money, you say yes, and then worry about the consequences later. As far as Duncan Robinson goes, guys, Davis Bertans, Joe Harris, they both signed in the $80 million range the last offseason. This turns into less about Duncan Robinson. Is he worth it? Is he not worth it? And this is the market rate for a guy who shoots that well with that much volume. And so much of Miami's offense is based on the threat, the gravity that this guy pulls. So I hate to say it, but yeah, he's worth every penny for them, for their offense, and for what he does in this league.
He's a specialist, and the Miami Heat are almost too good at developing some of these players that come out of nowhere. Could they conceivably do the same thing with Max Strus? Maybe, but you have a proven commodity. Tom, you seem to like this deal, or at least think it's a fair deal.
Yeah, so good.
What?
I'm laughing at Max Strus. What do you mean, what, Tom?
Yeah, yeah. Not a max deal, Max Strus.
I didn't know. I didn't catch that. Sorry. Yeah. So when you look at Duncan Robinson, the fact that he is one of the best 3-point shooters in the league on a team that desperately needs 3-point shooting, I think it's just a testament to the fact that this is a supply and demand issue for the Miami Heat. Where else are we going to get a guy of that caliber shooting on the marketplace? And when they're capped out, they only have to look into their team. Whatever Duncan Robinson asks for, they have to seriously consider it because of the fact they don't have many other options. So $20 million a year for Duncan Robinson, a 41% shooter on high volume on catch and shoots, and just with the ball in transition. I'm okay with that deal. The question here is that going to be enough? If Duncan Robinson gets hurt, is Max Strus going to be able to come in and provide that punch? Because they don't have a lot of guys. It's very top heavy.
And to just back up what Tom is saying. A year ago, this Miami Heat team, when they went to the finals, had the 7th best offensive rating, and was 2nd in 3-point shooting. Mm-hmm. Last year, 18th in offense, 19th in 3-point shooting. There is no version of this this particular team's offense, that can exist without credible 3-point threats. And, in that regard, that's what makes Duncan Robinson so valuable to them.
To a degree, I know what we're doing with the Duncan Robinson thing. It's not just the Opie-looking face. It's the fact that he seemingly came out of nowhere. But statistically speaking, this is on a track to be one of the greatest 3-point shooters in the history of the association, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at a position where he doesn't need to handle the ball, he can play off the ball, and he plays hard defensively. I'm not saying he's Kawhi Leonard defensively.
Oh, come on now. Come on. This ain't about defense. Don't make this about defense.
He's like 6'8", though. He does his best.
They're attacking him. Wherever it is that he is, that's where the ball goes.
There are plenty of players, like when the Miami Heat decided to bring in Duncan Robinson and develop him, he couldn't stay on the floor defensively, and he has worked so much better to get to be playable. You look at Troy Daniels. Troy Daniels is a great example of a guy who seemed like every great player in the league should get him because he shot 43% from 3-point. Unplayable. Yeah. Like he just could not play defense at an NBA level. So Duncan Robinson is someone who's able to be at least wading in the water, treading water defensively, and being just excellent Kyle Korver-like 3-point shot.
Tom, it reminds me of Steve Novak. Do you remember when Steve Novak was? Someone just said he's a glorified Steve Novak.
That's what I was thinking when it came up. That he had one season for the Knicks. Did he win the 3-point competition? One season. We just gave I can see a lot of people looking at this and saying if Steve Novak was playing in the modern age, he would be getting $20 million a year for that one season.
No, he wouldn't for two reasons. One, Steve Novak was not as prolific a three-point shooter. Like Duncan Robinson has volume. What Mike said is really important. It's not just he's an accurate three-point shooter. He shoots a shit ton of them. Like he's not taking 3 or 4 of them like a Novak or a Korver or some of these other guys. This guy's taking a lot of shots. Second of all, and I think this is really important, when I look at a guy like, some of the great three-point shooters like a Seth Curry, like a JJ Redick, what also makes them special is they move without the ball. And some of these other names, like Novak, like Troy Daniels, they were stationary shooters, meaning if it ain't happening, it ain't happening. Even Bertans doesn't move that much off ball. Duncan Robinson is on the Rip Hamilton, Ray Allen plan.
What you guys are saying is this isn't even Korver. What you're talking about, because he shoots so many of them, because the game has gone to a place where the Phoenix Suns just lost the title because instead of taking 43s a game, they were taking 20 a game because Milwaukee took the 20s away. What you are saying about Duncan Robinson is he is too integral to everything you do offensively, spacing of the floor and volume of shots, and what they're doing there is playing with the math. A guy that takes that many threes is more valuable than a guy who is doing things in the 2 range because he's changing your entire offense.
So it's twofold, Dan. One is exactly what you said. And second of all is even in a vacuum, what do elite three-point shooters make in this league? We got 2 guys in the same conference who basically set the market a year ago.
We've got breaking news. Kyle Lowry himself has announced that he is going to the Miami Heat on his social media channels. We'll talk about that in just one second. I think the argument in what they're saying with Duncan Robinson is you're comparing it with the glorified Steve Novak thing. He was a very limited player. Steve Novak had a skill set that you would think would have kept him in the league if he was like if he was capable of doing anything other than just camping out in one spot and catching and shooting.
That's what you're saying. He didn't move at all. In fact, there was one playoff season, I think, Mike, where the Heat were playing the Knicks, and the Knicks ended up getting swept because he would just have his mail delivered to one spot on the floor, and the Heat just kept the player there. And Steve Novak didn't have a 3 for the entire playoff series.
Duncan Robinson has tremendous size for his position. He keeps the defender working incredibly hard to stay with him, and he's got incredible range. He's capable of creating his own shot from distance in ways that Steve Novak certainly wasn't. We don't know the machinations of the deal. We can assume Goran Dragic is going to be a part of this because the Miami Heat exercised their team option, but now it's no longer fantasy. Now it's no longer hearsay. Kyle Lowry is indeed headed to the Miami Heat, according to Duncan Robinson. And now we have breaking news on the discussion that we just had on Duncan Robinson. 5 years, $90 million, guys.
So 18 a year. That's slightly less than what those other 2 guys got on an average annual value basis, but $90 million, $10 million more guaranteed money. And I mean, I don't know what to tell you guys. Like, them's beat the brakes, man. That's the NBA.
Yeah, Joe Harris signed last year for $72 million over 4 years. That's 18 per. And that's the market rate. Like Amin said, he's 29 years old, turning 30. Joe Harris, he's a couple of years older than Duncan Robinson. So you can see the Miami Heat saying, we're willing to go an extra year with this guy because he's a little younger than Joe Harris. And that set the market rate. And that was a $20 million a year for Duncan Robinson maybe a couple years ago would seem insane. But with this roster and where the NBA is going, that's a solid deal for the Miami Heat.
You guys help me with this part of it because you guys are talking about Joe Harris. Joe Harris, if he makes a shot in the second round, Milwaukee's not champions. He's the best three-point shooter in the entire sport by percentage. He had a wide open shot to put them like up 8 in one of those games, and he missed the shot. If Joe Harris makes that shot, you might be talking about a different champion. The thing that I wanted to ask you is, the Nets don't actually need Joe Harris because their 3 offensive guys are crazy good from all over the floor. What you guys are saying is you have to pay Duncan Robinson like that because without Duncan Robinson, you simply aren't going to be an elite offense. You will not be the offense that got to the finals against the Lakers unless you have that to space the floor. That's what you're saying, right? It's not even just about Duncan Robinson. It's that he's not Joe Harris. It's not going rate stuff. He's critical to everything you do offensively.
Well, if you want to put it on Jimmy Butler for not winning that series, okay. If you want to put it on Duncan Robinson, he's not the guy who deserves to be the GOAT for that series. But in that series against Milwaukee, 24 points in game 1, 10 in game 2, 2 in game 3, and 5 in game 4. If your 3-point shoot specialist is not on, it's going to be really hard to win in today's NBA, just like you saw with the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah. Amin, your takeaway so far from the Kyle Lowry news, is there you have that front office background. We haven't seen the official details in this move because there are still some pieces falling into place potentially. Miami Heat are still trying to maneuver their ways to get more, and that's why you haven't seen the details yet on this deal?
Yeah, so basically I think it's Toronto, right? We got what Toronto accepts back in a deal basically is going to dictate how much Miami can offer to Kyle Lowry in the starting year of his contract, because the sign and trade rules are, because the Heat are operating as an over the cap team, it's got to be within a certain range of the salaries that they have outgoing. So while they figure out all that gives them a range of what they can actually offer them.
Mike, I need to ask the group, because we are dominating into free agency talk. We're dominating this with Miami Heat talk. Is the nation laughing at what the Heat are doing? And is the nation laughing at the idea that Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler and age is what you're going to go after the super teams of the future on? And specifically a Giannis who just scored in a game 6, something that you simply don't have anywhere on the court. Is Milwaukee going to club you again with Connaughton and Forbes?
Probably. I don't think that the nation right now is presently laughing at the Miami Heat, because the Miami Heat are the only team giving the nation anything so far during NBA free agency, and they're desperate for news. I think the New York Knicks are having an interesting offseason so far. We do have to say goodbye to Tom Haberstroh, who was kind enough to join us on his vacation from the Smoky Mountains somewhere. So we'll say goodbye to Tom and his bad internet. Just on the way out, one more time, we'd like to remind you and the audience how wrong you were in saying Steph Curry was possibly not going to re-sign with the Golden State Warriors. And then moments later, it was reported by reputable Mark Stein that he is expected to re-sign in 2022.
Hasn't come in yet, Mike. Just wanted to note, has not come in across the wire that Stephen Curry has signed a purported. But I on another note, I wanted to ask Amin this before I go. Are the Knicks like the most stalking horse team in the NBA? They have $54 million in cap space heading into this offseason. People are excited. Maybe they'll get Freudian slip. Maybe they'll get Chris Paul. Maybe they'll get Kawhi Leonard. Maybe they'll get ex-free agent. Are they going to be just hanging out in the cold again in free agency with all this cap space and nothing to do with it? Is it an agent's dream to have the New York Knicks with cap space?
They might have been the stalking horse for Chris Paul, who has just agreed to a $120 million deal to stay with Phoenix. I mean,
man, the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Like everyone's like, the Knicks have cap space. The Knicks have cap space, and you got all the major targets there. Chris Paul stays with Phoenix. You got Mike Conley stays with Utah. You got Kyle Lowry say, I will switch teams, but I'm going to Miami, and Lonzo Ball goes to Chicago.
I mean, if this is the new going rate, though, the Miami Heat just got younger with Jimmy Butler paying him only $50 million at 36. If the Suns are going to be paying Chris Paul $40 million at 40, he's going to be 40 at the end of this contract.
$30 million. Then it's 4 years, $120 million.
Yes, thank you. But again, at 40 years old, these are backloaded, so it's going to be $40 million on the back end, is it not?
I would point out that it depends on how they do it. They could structure it descending, because his salary last year was so high, they could actually front load it where the big money is now, and then you have it de-escalating as it goes on, because that's when everybody else's contracts go up. That's how I would do it, and I think that's how they're going to do it. I know the cap guy over there, and he's a fan of these very weird structured contracts. But the difference between Jimmy Butler and Chris Paul is that Chris Paul is a very ground-bound player who is skilled, who can shoot. And Jimmy Butler, a lot of his game is physical. It's getting to the free throw line. It's being physically more dominant than his opponents. And I wonder, as athleticism wanes for him, will he be able to get those steps? Will he be able to muster that strength, especially because he's not a good shooter?
Is this going to be a bad deal for the Phoenix Suns ultimately?
See, this is more of an example of what Dan was talking about, where worry about that shit later. Right now, we went to the finals. We were up 2-0 in the finals. Bring the band back together, add some tweaks here and there. We can push right now. And then later on, we can worry about, did we make a mistake? You don't want to get cute and say, Chris, thanks, but no thanks. He ends up somewhere else, and now you're starting back in the pack. So in this case, what Dan was describing, I agree with, because this is a team that demonstrated not only were we one of the best teams all year long during the regular season, we were one of the most consistent teams all throughout the playoffs, and we're up 2-0 in the finals. The Miami Heat, sadly, don't have that resume from last year to point to say, yeah, we're right there. We're almost there.
We haven't had nearly enough funny in this thing.
Don't forget
we are doing such serious breakdown. Go ahead, Tom. Before you get out of here, you and your shitty internet and your shitty analysis and
get a drink.
Your shitty Space Jam jokes. Thank you.
I mean, you've been on it. So why is Amin getting a drink? And Tom, I thought I said goodbye to you 10 minutes ago.
I know, but Dan had to just tell me I had shitty internet when the point was that he was late because of shitty internet, Dan.
Yeah, that's true.
Come on,
glass
man.
home. From the background, it does look like he lives in a glass house.
Okay. All right, get out of here. Mike, it's you and me. Tom, get out of here with your shitty internet from the mountains. Now it's free agent. If you want exclusive coverage of everything happening in NBA free agency, in other words, Mike with that ridiculous mustache and me just reading our Twitter feeds and finding out what everyone else is reporting. I've still got the lyrics to that song, if you want it, that I was supposed to give this morning on what it is that's happening in the NBA based on my Heat information. Would you like me to find that for you?
I would like you to find that for me. In the meantime, I will once again take the opportunity to say, stop with the Steve Novak comparisons on Duncan Robinson. I get it. They're white. They shoot threes. But Duncan Robinson has a range. Steve Novak didn't even have range for a three-point shooter. He stood at the shortest possible three he could take, and he was perpetually there his entire career.
Look up the game logs for when they put Wade on Novak in those Knicks playoff games. He was going to be like their second most important player, and then he just stood on the corner and he was covered every time. He simply couldn't get away from anybody. He is not in any way Duncan Robinson. I've got those lyrics, though.
Duncan Robinson has the exact same playbook, even more complex, that Eric Spoelstra was drawing up for Ray Allen, a guy who probably shortened Dwayne Wade's career by moving around so much. Duncan Robinson is an excellently conditioned athlete that is, as we said, on a career trajectory to be one of the greatest NBA three-point shooters of all time, despite the fact that he had no guts in the NBA Finals. No guts whatsoever. One game that inflated his stats.
Only two players in the history of the NBA have shot higher than 42% from three on 5+ attempts. Steph Curry, 43.3. Duncan Robinson, 42.3. By the way, the contract he just signed was the largest contract ever for an undrafted player.
It's the way he looks. And let's just say it. That the analysis is being infected strictly and exclusively because it's the long face, it's the pale skin. Look, I watched Slovenia yesterday. No, don't tell me no. I mean, I watched Slovenia yesterday, and I'm watching Luka Doncic, and I still don't understand how somebody with that body type and that hair and clearly partying a great deal and a legitimate double chin is ruling the league. And the only reason you'd underestimate him is because of it's the way he looks. And this is absolutely happening with Duncan Robinson. He looks like a cartoon character out of some sort of Disney thing, and he looks like a basketball player if animators drew him, and this is the reason that he's being underestimated.
I submit to you that if Duncan Robinson didn't have his disappearing act in the finals, if he just shot the shit out of it throughout the whole series, nobody would be questioning the contract or him.
He's not even Kyle Korver. I mean, he's so much better than Kyle Korver because of what you're talking about. The volume, the fact that he's going to shoot twice as many as Kyle Korver.
Yep. I mean, I agree, but he has, unfortunately, like some high profile disappearing act games that Kyle Korver never had.
I mean, you made the point. If he actually showed up in the NBA Finals outside of one game, we might actually be talking about him as NBA champion, Duncan Robinson.
I mean, what are you talking about? Kyle Korver never had across the decade, across all the teams. Kyle Korver had all sorts of games where he disappeared.
high profile.
You just don't.
Not
He was
high
never
profile.
counted on to do anything. You never
That's
thought
fair.
of Kyle Korver as anything other than some team's 4th or 5th or 6th best player.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment, Dan. I'm just saying Duncan Robinson performed well enough for us to have expectations that he didn't meet. And you know whose fault it is? It's not Eric Spoelstra's fault. It's not Duncan Robinson's fault. It's that son of a bitch he invited into the bubble who was like, oh my God, LeBron knows who you are. It's all that dude's fault. Because before that, Duncan Robinson was great. He's hitting shots like, of course I'm in the NBA. What you think? And then his buddy's like, dude, LeBron knows your first name. He should know your name. You're a scrub. How are you here? And Duncan Robinson's whole confidence shattered in that moment. And he was like, oh shit, he's right. I shouldn't be here. How does LeBron know my name? And everything changed after that.
We'll talk a little bit more about Kyle Lowry, but one last thing on Duncan Robinson. And I found this aspect of the reporting a little interesting. And I mean, maybe you know what I'm talking about, but Woj tweeted out Duncan Robinson - host of the At Longshot pod has agreed to a 5-year, $90 million contract to stay with the Miami Heat. And then he gives the agent some love in the tweet as in addition to doing a live read for his podcast. Is that just taking care of the agent so you continue to protect that relationship?
Taking care of the agent, and also, hey, we'll throw you this if you show some love for our guys so that people subscribe to the podcast, because of course that's what people need driving their attention. Like if Woj said his podcast is there, surely I should be listening to it. What do you think Duncan Robinson talks about? I've never listened to his podcast. What does he talk about?
He's not a great. He's not. I've seen him as a guest in a lot of different places, and he never says anything interesting ever.
It's not like Matt Bonner. Like Matt Bonner's a funny dude. So like when they said Matt Bonner has a podcast, I'm like, I'm gonna listen to it. And I listened to it, and he was talking about like the best place to get a taco in San Antonio, and like comparing the different type of Mexican food offerings from these different restaurants. Like, okay, Matt Bonner, I'm with you. But like Duncan Robinson, I don't care for this.
You correct me if I'm wrong, though. I think that whatever it is that I don't know who's following Duncan Robinson, and I'm only familiar with having seen him interviewed in some of these venues. But is it possible that people are tuning into the Duncan Robinson podcast because they want to live vicariously through, oh my God, you LeBron talked to you guy, where we all feel like we look at Duncan Robinson and somehow people are underestimating him and saying, I could be out there too, living this great life, getting 5 years, $90 million, and LeBron would know my name, because he doesn't look like NBA dominance.
Let me tell you right now, the people I want to listen to are obviously not superstars, because they don't know how to articulate. Everything to them has always happened that way. I've always been great, so this was supposed to happen. And it's not the Duncan Robinsons who have the personality of a piece of paper. I want like the JJ Redicks, the Jared Dudleys, the Channing Frys, because these are the guys that have achieved, but at the same time have an appreciation of like what they achieved. Like, this is freaking insane. Can you believe this? LeBron James is passing me the ball at the end of a game. You know, so those are the guys. Personality shines. And Duncan Robinson, nobody here, I don't give a damn what you people in the chat are saying right now. It means a hater or whatever. Goddamn right, I'm a hater. That dude has no personality. Now,
this is a very strange character assassination that we've done over the last 3 minutes, saying Duncan Robinson. It's just flatly sources Duncan Robinson boring. It's just kind of,
you know what? Mike is right. Wait a minute. This is a career achievement.
Weird.
Mike is so right about this. No undrafted player has ever gotten this kind of contract. He's an offensive game changer for the Heat. We should be celebrating this story instead of minutes after he signs with a career achievement, a victory for the everyman. You and I are pooping on his podcast. And this is Woj's fault, and it's the fault of Woj's agent, and it's the fault of all this dirty dealing that there is, that we're too close to the action. And now we're seeing how Woj gets his information. It's just by, tickling these agents, and all of a sudden there's a podcast read in the middle of a Woj bomb, which isn't even known as a Woj bomb on ESPN anymore, because Disney wants to make it a Woj alert. You can't have bombs anywhere near the draft or news. It's got to be an alert. An alert is safer.
And then don't forget that little shit that he took with him to the bubble, who told him like, oh my God, how is this possible? I hate that guy more than anybody in the world.
Mike is so
Duncan
right.
Robinson's friend.
We deserve to get killed for anything we're saying about this. This should be a reason for celebration. Duncan Robinson, a career achievement.
And you mentioned Matt Bonner, and fans of the Batard show may remember his one appearance on the Dan Batard show with Stugotz. I believe Dan was out that day when Stugotz asked him, "You like sandwiches, huh?" Miami is the fake butt implant capital of the world, and a famous butt is headed to Miami. I'm talking about the lower half of Kyle Lowry and the top half too. That is pretty good at stealing the ball as well. Kyle Lowry, he's got a famous ass. Let's just say.
I thought you said his top half was ass. Like
no, talking about his ass.
His playoff performances before Kawhi were ass.
Yes, but we talked about this some on today's show. Obviously, the age is a concern. It's a player that a lot of Miami Heat fans have to talk themselves into, despite the fact that he's had an incredible NBA career. But let's just say the Kawhi Leonard thing is not very real, and you're looking at a team of DeMar DeRozan, Duncan Robinson, Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, no Goran Dragic now, but you have a point of attack defender in Kyle Lowry that can not only do some stuff for you offensively, but he can make this one of the more problematic defenses to face. And you're in a conference with a really good offense in Brooklyn. You're going to need some of that help.
Yeah, yes. I mean, look, like I said, there's no one saying that this isn't a step up for the Miami Heat. This is an improvement. This helps. But it just, how much does it help? And how much are you committing now? 3 years for Kyle Lowry, I think that's pretty good.
3 years, $90 million, according to Priority Sports.
No, shout out to Mark Bartlestein in the building. See, I could do it too, Dan. I can tickle agents as well. Hey, Mark Bartlestein, good job. $30 million a year.
Where's your information that comes that said tickling?
Yeah, Amin, shout out Mark Bartlestein, so we can just get that.
Are you in agreement with me that this is Riley taking one last big swing, man? That this is
1,000%, Dan. And I like the way you put it. It's not one last big swing for this group. It's one last big swing for him and Mickey, because they may not be around for any more swings if you build it the long way.
Then why'd they sign Jimmy Butler to an extension too?
Because they don't got to worry about that.
They don't have to worry about it
in 5 years. Like, who cares?
It's like climate. It's like climate change. You don't have to recycle right now. Just for the next 2.5 years. Never mind what's going to happen 4 years from now. Just give me 2.5 more years of relevance.
Hey, that's Nick and Andy's fault or problem. They got to figure that shit out. Yeah. But hell, Spo may even have like gone upstairs by then, right? Like, is Spo going to hand it out to Dan Craig or someone like that? Juwan Howard going to come back?
It is been thrown out there by our Miami Heat front office insider Dan Batard that the succession plan for Pat Riley's been there the entire time. Erik Spoelstra.
Who's the succession plan for Spo? We can't say that. Now we can't say shit.
No, I don't know it. I have not asked the question. Well, who's after Spo? I don't know. I don't know where along the line here, right? I thought it was interesting to see what happened in Green Bay, where Aaron Rodgers comes back and he's like, "Hey, this guy was your scout, and now he's telling me who's in charge here," because he rose up to GM. The whole time that he was coming up from scout, I was the MVP of the league. Erik Spoelstra goes from video coordinator to he is stuck now. He is stuck 2.5 years. To me, everything that's happened here is about what are the next 3 years going to look like, and is Erik Spoelstra going to be like a Brad Stevens type in 3 years as he tries to raise kids? Do you think that Erik Spoelstra is going to be a 20-year lifer of coaching this? You don't think he's going to outgrow some of this stuff and feel like he wants to move on to other things? I thought that Portland job was going to be super interesting to him for that reason. I mean,
Dan, Stan Van Gundy, our friend Stan, hasn't outgrown it. You think Spo is going to outgrow it? Like, these guys are crazy. It's in their blood. They can't shake it. And if they do say, hey, you know what? Too much. Got to take some time. Guess what? They always come back.
Forgive me. I'm not talking about outgrowing the coaching in general. I'm talking about even Pat Riley changed franchises. Like, none of these guys stay with the same franchise the whole time. You got Popovich. Spo is what, second in the league in tenure, or is he first? It's after Popovich.
He's second
in the league.
Behind Pop.
And isn't like Steve Kerr fifth or something ridiculous like that? Like, these guys get turned over. Nobody has a job as long as Spoelstra has it in that league.
Sure, but I think because Spo's been there as long as he has, if he has aspirations of moving upstairs, that's going to happen 1000%, right? If you look at like other corollaries like Jerry Sloan, who coached a million years, Jerry Sloan just didn't want to do the shit anymore. Like there was no upstairs that he wanted to do. He wanted to coach until one day he's like, you know what? Fuck this shit. I'm done. Walked away. And then his assistant, Phil Johnson, who's supposed to be the heir apparent, said, fuck this too. Sorry, I just cursed twice. And he walked out too.
Yeah, shortly after you said you were grabbing a drink. It's not lost on me.
They never came back, right? So for me, Spoelstra's been there long enough not to feel suffocated because Pat in LA was bumping heads with people. He wanted more, and there was no more to give Pat.
But, I mean, that's what I just saw today. And again, all I have is music lyrics that are telling me what the code and the riddle is that the Miami Heat were going to do today. I got a text that has some music lyrics on it. But everything that I'm seeing right now, without actually having talked to the people, Mike, it feels like all these guys are going in all in for the next 2 years, 3 years. My guess would be that Eric Spoelstra, if he's going to still be with the organization, will be with Nick Harrison and with Andy Ellisberg as whatever the new group of people are. I can't imagine Mickey Harrison and Pat Riley running this thing in their 80s. Like,
no, I'm with you there. Does the lure of potentially being the all-time winningest head coach in that sport do anything for Eric Spoelstra? Because Pop's probably getting the record this season from Don Nelson, considering how early in his life Eric Spoelstra became a head coach and all the success that he has. That's certainly a lofty goal, but he can certainly achieve it.
20 years is 20 more years of coaching is what you need to do something like that, when I'm talking about this being for the next 2 or 3 years.
Man, it's tough. I'm gonna tell you right now, Mike, it's really tough when you consider, again, Pop being active, and not only that, but Pop also gets you with the oh, by the way, I've had it all with one franchise, so you can't even get that one.
Well, Spoken have that.
Spoken have that, but I'm just saying Pop's already got it.
Yeah.
So in order for him to continue, and what Pop had that Spo never had was the benefit of, I walked in with one of the greatest players of all time, who then went on to play 20 goddamn years, and it was elite every year, went to the playoffs every year, was above 500 every year. Like, that's a level of consistency throughout his tenure that Spo had to do. I coached Chris Quinn and friends. I coached Joel Anthony as a starter, right? I coached Michael Beasley. Spo went through the shit that Pop never had to go. Pop right now, this is as close to the shit as Pop has been since he took over when David Robinson got hurt. And that's a huge leg up.
Dan, do you have those song lyrics that we never even mentioned what the song was? I actually meant to text you the song lyrics during the show so you could read them off your phone. I accidentally texted these song lyrics to my dad, and he was worried about me, and he called me, and he's like, hey, it was poignant and beautiful. Are you okay? I'm like, oh, man, I didn't even mean to send that to you.
Okay, so this is the backstory for those of you who do not understand. We have lost Tom Haberstroh, who isn't any kind of real insider, and I've been talking to Amin all day about whether or not he wants to accept the lane of drunken basketball insider who's just always got a drink and has always got bad judgment and is just saying dumb shit, because we've leaned on Amin for basketball analysis so much in the last 2 weeks, and the last public things he said were as embarrassing as any things that nobody else in national media said anything as embarrassing as Amin. He's associated with being the most wrong of anybody on the final.
Wait a second. What about Tom Haberstroh today, who said that, hey, look out for Steph Curry not re-signing next year, and then hours later it was reported that that's expected?
Also, he shit on Michael Jordan, which is like the cardinal sin of anyone in basketball.
Called him a quitter. That's one of the first things he did on one of these pop-ups after feeling the need to meticulously give us the game score in a game where Giannis scored 50, and that's pretty much enough. He gave us the game score to be more numerically accurate. He then later said, and also Michael Jordan's a quitter, and didn't acknowledge that he quit because his dad was murdered. Are you
saying this is a two-horse race for most embarrassing NBA analyst, and you've decided to start your startup with?
And we got them both.
that Tom said he talked to GMs and Amin fancies himself an insider. And these lyrics are the closest thing to Heat information and sourcing and reporting that we have. This is from a high-level Miami Heat source telling me what was coming, again, after sending me the shit emoji, which is the symbol for shit is going down.
Can you do the Brian Gumble thing of putting on glasses before you read them to make them super important and not at all a sign of your aging because you're wearing a baseball cap? Come on.
Please cross your legs while you read this too.
Yeah.
We're not.
So can you speak in the? Is that a Yeti? I hope it is.
Is it far? Am I close enough?
It's all right. It's working.
You
are wearing pants, right?
I am not. I'm wearing shorts, but thankfully I'm not wearing underwear, which I've done 2 of these wearing underwear.
Keep the lower third scrolling, please.
Say I Won't, a song by Mercy Me. This is Christian rock. Are you ready? What does this mean? That the Heat were up to something. Like, this is before people started reporting stuff. Today, it all begins. I'm seeing my life for the very first time through a different lens. Yesterday, I didn't understand. Driving 35 with the rocket inside, didn't know what I had.
Kyle Lowry's a Rocket. He's 35 years old.
Yeah, former Rocket. He's 35 years old.
See, thank you, Amin, because this is exactly what was happening here. While I've been waiting to live, my life's been waiting on me. Kyle Lowry.
Wait, that's not a lyric in the song.
Wait a minute. It doesn't say Kyle Lowry there. I just jumped to that conclusion because it rhymes. Ready? I'm going to run.
Christian rock? Really?
I'm going to run. No, I'm going to fly. I'm going to know what it means to live and not just be alive. The world's going to hear because I'm going to shout. And I will be dancing when circumstances drown the music out. Say I won't, motherfucker. Say I won't.
It says motherfucker in a Christian rock song?
I did that to get the emotional.
Gotcha.
All right.
Not enough is what I've been told, but it must be a lie because the spirit inside me says I'm so much more. So let them say what they want, or I dare them to try. Say I
Here
won't.
goes $90 million to the 6'8" white guy. I was just playing finish the lyric.
Let's move on.
There we go.
Attaboy. But real quick, did they get a DeLorean with Kyle Lowry in this deal?
Why? What's the joke?
Time machine. Go back to being. I think Tom Haberstroh, our numbers guy, said today that he's 35 years old, but really 31 when you consider that he sat out 20 games this year. Tom Haberstroh.
He didn't say that.
I'm worried about Tom. Like, Tom, I don't think he knows how to use the numbers.
No, it's not that. It's not that he doesn't know how to use the numbers. It's you guys.
He certainly doesn't know how to use a computer.
I mean, I know he doesn't know how to use the internet. He uses HughesNet for his wife. I was so excited today when he revealed that his internet connection was via satellite, like those HughesNet ads that we see all the time, advertised on every station. And I always thought, who uses this? Who doesn't have access to like coax, right? Yeah. Like your cable company, they can't run some high-speed internet. Turns out I know who now. Tom Haberstroh on vacation.
One thing that we haven't heard from basically his entire career is Kawhi Leonard. And Kawhi Leonard opted out. Real G's move in silence. There is not a single morsel out there. It was only several years after that we found out the back channel ways of Kawhi Leonard and how he'd get players acquired. Is it almost too quiet, Dan?
Can we talk about this for a second? I mean, because you ho-hummed when Matt Sullivan, the author of that Nets book, laid out for us, bare naked, hey, the Nets are running that Brooklyn franchise. They get all sorts of deals, budgets. They just do whatever they want. They've realized they're the economy of the Brooklyn Nets, and the Brooklyn Nets are there to serve them. When you talk about Kawhi Leonard, real G's move in silence, he has been a mercenary of the highest order, and he has dictated the terms, on his fame in a way the media never allows. We don't know shit about that dude. We don't know shit about his power moves. We don't know how to get close to him by bartering with his agent or Uncle Dennis for information. He is allowed to be the quietest sports star that I have ever seen in my lifetime, going back to Vladimir Guerrero having to cover a language barrier and in a different country with a 5th grade education. We don't know anything about Kawhi Leonard. He's a total mystery.
Dan, I got 2 words for you. Harvin Marison.
You don't talk
Total-
about him.
You don't know
Total mystery.
you don't know that Kawhi Leonard hasn't also done some of that because you don't know shit. You at least know that you were not to mention the name of Harvin Marison because there may be some.
After he was done, though, after he was finished, in the middle of it,
You know
guys all
something
thought,
about
what
Harvin Marison.
what a
If I
gentleman.
told you
Yeah.
that
What a
Kawhi
gentleman.
Leonard, if I told you Kawhi Leonard was actually a serial killer, you would say, well, I saw that coming, possibly. I don't know. Maybe, possibly. I don't know.
I don't have enough information right now to rule it out. There was one of my favorite Kawhi stories actually came out in that Ramona Shelburne piece on Russell Westbrook.
It's great.
It was a great nugget.
Yeah.
That Russell Westbrook was the brains behind the Paul George move because he was trying to find his own way out of Oklahoma City. He called Kawhi Leonard about it. Kawhi Leonard was listening, not talking, knew to himself that he'd rather play with Paul George. And then he called Paul George and he's like, you're not going to believe what Russell Westbrook is trying to do.
Do y'all want to hear the story time that I don't think I've ever told on air? The story time
of course, yes.
of how the Phoenix Suns ended up with the guy who ran the team after Steve Kerr left in 2010. You know the story? You don't know the story. I've never told the story. So Steve Kerr leaves, and David Griffin the next day is like, I'm out too. And now the Suns have no leadership. We go into free agency, and it's just like us giving suggestions and Robert Sarver just playing fantasy basketball, right? So it's time. We sign Hakeem Warwick, and Amari Stoudemire leaves, and we don't even do a sign and trade. I was like, are we not going to try and get something for him? No? Okay. I wish I was louder. But anyways, what ends up happening is Robert Sarver goes and gets on the phone, and he calls the agent for Grant Hill, Lon Babby. This was the guy that repped Grant Hill, Ray Allen, and Tim Duncan. He's a lawyer by trade. He wasn't even an agent. He was like, you guys are getting max. Why are you paying me 4%? Just I'll bill you hourly and I'll take care of it. So Lon Babby heads this search on behalf of the Suns.
It's a great name, by the way, Lon Babby.
It is a great name. And also that is a terrible executive, right? I am not a good executive, a long time executive. Do I have this wrong?
No. Dan, we're in the DeLorean. It's 2010. Lon Babby's an agent.
All right.
He's a lawyer / agent. He's not an executive. He's never been an executive. His only work for a team was for the Washington racial slurs in like the early 80s, and he was legal counsel at that time.
Awesome.
All right, sorry. Okay.
I just needed to highlight the fact that his name was Lon Babby.
Place to stop, and I think at any point going forward in the future, if anyone mentions Lon Babby, our show should treat that as a speed bump. We all have to stop and applaud. Great name.
Okay, great name for this guy who is, as we are in the hot take time machine, he's just an agent, right? So because he deals with all the teams, he's like, I know who's good and who's not. So he goes and he does his search, and he comes back and he says, guys, I searched far and I searched wide, and I think I found who your best candidate is for president of operations.
We know this.
Robert Sarver says, I found him. He's like, Robert Sarver says, that's awesome. Where'd you find him? He says, in the mirror this morning. It's me. Hear me out. And so he goes to all this, and Robert's like, you know what? That's a good idea. Hires him. Grant Hill walks in and says, so did Lon find a guy? And Robert's like, yeah, he found himself. Isn't that awesome? And Grant is like, whoa, wait, hold on. I just suggested my guy because he talked to people, not because I was suggesting my guy for the job. So this guy who's never worked in an NBA team before, it's like, all right, I'll do it. Then realizes very quickly, I know nothing about running an NBA team. I've been a lawyer for basically my entire life. So his solution to find the person who knows how to run a team to work under him is to go to the closest, dearest friends he has in basketball. Do you know what their names were? R.C. Buford and Greg Popovich, a.k.a. the people that we just sweat their ass out the playoffs literally a couple months ago. So as I imagine it, it's RC and Pop in the office, and they get a phone call. It's like, hello? Hey, Lon, how's it going? Oh, congratulations. You got the job. All right, cool. Well, you want, hold on. He wants a suggestion for who to be his GM. I mean, yeah, I think I know a guy. And they literally suggest their biggest flunky who came out of their organization. Won't even say his name. That's how big of a flunky he is. He doesn't deserve even a drunk Amin mention on a Batard special edition show.
Oh, come on. Give me a drunk mention.
No, I'm not because I have any decorum, but because I refuse to give this guy who's literally been unemployed in basketball ever since.
Is it a name we'd recognize? Is it a name?
No, because he's a bum. That's why.
Okay, but they recommended to Lon Babby that he hired their worst employee.
Pretty much. Now, this guy comes over and he gets hired, and immediately after he gets hired, I get phone calls from people talking about, why'd y'all hire him? I'm like, I don't really know much about him. It's like, yeah, the team he just came from, he didn't do any of the running the basketball part. He was in charge of like what players are going to do when they retire, give them suggestions about like, hey, you think about being in media? That was his job. He was like player relations.
Mike, you have a story like this. You're the CEO of the Dolphins, hired himself, set the franchise back for 5 years because he was hired to be the headhunter who found the next CEO or COO, and he woke up one morning after a national search and he hired himself and decided that Mike Tomlin was too hip-hop to be his head coach. Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, I was there for when he said that. Is it Lance Blanks?
Oh, nice.
I don't say his name on air, man.
I think it might be Lance Blanks, Mike. I think you might have cornered our NBA, our drunken NBA.
I was like a dog with a bone on this one. I'm right.
Yes, I think that.
I don't say his name on air.
Do we have any more breaking news here? Do we have any more?
No, you have your own "He Who Shall Not Be Named," and it might be Lance Blanks.
I think it is.
At least Hassan Whiteside does things on a basketball court, or in the basketball world, or in the basketball media space, or in the basketball.
Blanks, Mike. You got it.
It seems like it's Lance Blanks.
You got it. He didn't say it, so there can't be an aggregated Amin Elhassan. Drunken Amin Elhassan takes out Lance Blanks, but we said it.
He served as director of scouting for the San Antonio Spurs. As a scout, was promoted to director of scouting in 2002. A little pit stop in Cleveland, and then was just straight up hired to be general manager, and he's never done anything since.
That's an incomplete resume because, as I remember it, he was director of scouting and then all of a sudden the color commentator on the radio broadcast for local games in San Antonio.
Oh, no. You guys hired their Ron Rothstein.
No,
at least Ron Rothstein actually coached. Oh, no, you hired Tony Fiorentino.
Yes, Mike. Ron Rothstein was an accomplished coach.
Yeah, no, Ron Rothstein was accomplished. This was
No.
Tony Fiorentino, who was called coach, and we had to Google.
Coach Tony, this is not me. I don't have I'm not.
This is not a shot at Tony Fiorentino, but in terms of bona fides, he shouldn't be a general manager, much like Lance Blanks was.
But Tony wasn't a general manager.
Okay.
Is that the end of your Lon Babby story?
That's my
His name is like
about
2 vowels away from making sense to me. Like if he was Len Bibby, I'd be like, normal name. Lon Babby. I'm like, do I know any other Lons outside of Lon Kruger? Is this a basketball specific thing? What is Lon short for? Is it Lonald?
Lonald.
Well, that's fairly amazing that the Babby is what's eluding your question.
Lon, yeah.
Babby by itself is a funny cartoon name, and
I'm more focused on the Lon and what it's short for.
It's not Leonard. What is the Lon short for?
Labby.
Maybe it's one of those tricky shortenings of a first name where it's like the back end of a first name, and they go by just Lon. Yeah,
Echelon Babby.
I could be Flan Babby, and then if you combine the two words, then it could be just Flabby.
Oh man, that's a Chris Cody dream right there.
Which the flan or the flabby?
Flan, Flabby.
Word combination.
Oh,
look at that.
Bobby Portis is breaking. The Miami Heat are showing interest in energy guy Bobby Portis, but he's looking for more than the 9.5 mid-level exception, according to Barry Jackson. If you were listening to our show with Bobby Portis, he made it clear that he is looking for a lot of money.
Yeah,
and he should. He should,
should,
because he took less money to come help a team win a championship. Mission accomplished. He was the second best player in that game 6. He was integral to their whole playoff run, and he did what he set out to do. He absolutely should be demanding every last dollar. It's what Cameron Payne should have been doing too. Again, Cameron
wait a
Payne,
minute.
who left money on the table.
And Bobby Portis is way too young to be taking the MLE as a guy that was a big-time contributor on a championship team. He's only 26 years old. He is way too young to be the veteran presence you bring into the locker room, even though we'll gloss over the fact that he broke a teammate's orbital bone.
Deserved it.
Cortez is sending me 2 years, $9 million for Bobby Portis to the Bucks. That can't be right, can it? That he would sign emotionally for 2 years, $9 million. Is that bad information? No, that's
no. Shams just a minute ago has agreed to a 2-year, $9 million deal. So he took a hometown discount. He would have had more with that MLE. That MLE has been linked to a couple of players, including DeRozan and Nick Batum. I mean,
so here's the deal with that. That's the most the Bucks could offer him by far. Like, they're a tax-paying team. They don't get the full mid-level exception. All they've got is a taxpayer mid-level exception. Because he's only been there 1 year, they have this thing called non-bird rights that only allows him to pay 120% of what he made last year, which wasn't enough. So the most they could offer him was this this taxpayer mid-level exception, which comes in at around 5 and some change, which makes sense for him scoring what he did. He definitely, Dan, there's no other way to describe it. If he signed for that much for real, it was truly an emotional, this is my home.
And Shams is confirming the report that he turned down interest from the Mavericks and the Heat, 2 teams with very similar roster constructions at this point, to re-sign and take that discount with the champion Bucks.
He turned down a lot of money, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby Portis made $15 million his last year with the Knicks. I'm doing this off the top of my head. And then he went to the Bucks for 2 years, like $7 million. So in that sport, that's ridiculous. The $3.5 million a year. And after being on our show and making it seem like he had a difficult decision to make and seeming to make it obvious that he was going to opt out of the deal that he was already in, he opted out, but opted back in for very little money. This guy is legitimately leaving about $20 million on the table at least, right? By going back there, is he not?
No, I would say he's leaving legitimate money on the table. But again, players, it's up to the player to figure out how much money is enough money and what is key to my happiness, right? Him being in Milwaukee and knowing he has a role that's valued and appreciated. And again, he had I thought he was the second best player for the Milwaukee Bucks in that game 6.
He was the second leading scorer before Middleton made a free throw late or something else. And he was good on defense. Mike, when you mentioned Bobby Portis, did he end Mirotich's career? Is that the guy he punched? Mirotic?
Yeah. Nikola Mirotic,
he didn't end his career. The guy's making a lot of money in Europe, but he's mentioned it, referenced it in an interview that that was an incident. It was like, oh shit, I don't know about this NBA thing. So
5 Reasons Sports, a verified account down here with ties to people that are plugged into the Miami Heat organization.
Are we allowed to say names? Are we alled to hype up the guy or no?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Ethan Skolnick, man. That's
Ethan
my guy,
Skolnick.
man.
Yeah, Ethan Skolnick has done good work in this market.
They do a good job covering all things Heat related. Their information's good.
This one, I can't say where this one is coming from, so I'm going to just attribute to 5 Reasons because there isn't a name attached, but the Miami Heat are still trying to acquire DeMar DeRozan, but it would likely require a significant reduction in salary compared to what he can get elsewhere. Is the draw of playing for potentially a contender in the East and reuniting with Kyle Lowry, is that enough at a discount? He's a Southern California guy, and he's drawing interest from the Lakers.
So the Lakers are not one of those significantly more money elsewhere places. The Lakers are basically going to tell him, play for minimum or play for the taxpayer mid-level, which isn't, like I said, it's about in the $5 million range. So for him, if he chose the Lakers, it would literally be, I want to play with LeBron. I want to live home. I want to play at home versus playing in Miami where 0% income tax for your state income tax, a former teammate that you get along great with, and a great organization as well. So he's balancing, I would say, those two things. It's pretty interesting, though, that Gary Trent, we just saw underneath 3 years, $54 million. That's 18 a year. Mike, 18 a year is exactly what Duncan Robinson got. Would you rather have Gary Trent or Duncan Robinson?
Gary Trent, I rate him, but for what Duncan Robinson provides, and now looking at the Miami Heat roster as presently constituted, Duncan Robinson's value outside of just a contract, just from a spacing point of view and what he can do offensively for you, I prefer Duncan Robinson at the number.
That's very strong. By the way, because I don't want the people in the chat to feel unappreciated, Josh Finkelstein says, how does Mike feel about a Zach Collins flyer? Now, if you don't know, Zach Collins was a young big guy for Portland that Portland really liked, but just kept getting hurt. Earlier this week, we found out that Portland rescinded his qualifying offer, meaning Zach Collins is an unrestricted free agent. He could sign anywhere, and there's no threat of a match from Portland. Mike, how do you feel about a Zach Collins flyer?
Can we talk John Collins instead, a local kid who is a restricted free agent and is not close to coming to terms with Atlanta just yet?
He's got to be expensive.
I mean, but you can, who knows what can be done with a sign and trade.
But that's the problem, is that he's expensive. The reason why he can't come to terms with the Hawks is because he's expensive. And because he's expensive, that means acquiring him is going to be very difficult, especially considering that you have no assets. Yeah. You have nothing to give.
No, it would have to be a trade. To answer your Zach Collins thing, though, I just wanted to make the John Collins news thing in here since it's a free agency special. Sure. The Miami Heat are going to have to, in all likelihood, replace Precious Achiuwa, who was an athletic big who tailed off at the end of the year, didn't really make the strides that the team was hoping for, and they brought in Dwayne Dedman and got a really good contribution from Dwayne Dedman. But I do think that they're going to need an athletic big that can keep people in front of them.
Dude, I've said this again and again on this show. To me, Miami is, if not number one, right up there in this league in terms of finding people who are lost, forgotten, or unfound and saying, I'll give you a chance, and turning them into bona fide rotation players. And if I were Miami, I would never stop doing that. I would just keep that crazy train going. Zach Collins absolutely fits the bill of a Miami Heat reclamation project. The guy was hurt. The guy was this. The guy was that. But he showed flashes. We're going to bring him here. We're going to get him in shape. And he's going to be great for us for really cheap because he does a little bit of all of it. And he's young as hell. I think he was 18 when he got drafted. He didn't turn 19 until later in that draft year. He's one of the young players. He's barely 23 right now. To me, if I'm Miami, Zach Collins is a guy I push hard for because we know size is an issue for the Miami Heat.
Mike, two questions here before we get out of here. One, do you believe, Amin, in all that culture chatter stuff, that they can get a Kyle Lowry who's in better shape than Kyle Lowry has been the entirety of his career? And the second question I want to ask you, because I don't think we've got your analysis on this, and I was surprised it wasn't but 12 months ago or so, less than 12 months ago. It was a few months ago. Mike Ryan went from Bam is everything about this team's future to what the hell is that a few months later in the playoffs. What happened to Bam? And is he going to grow as a player, or is it going to stay where it is? Because you have to, if you're going to do this with the Jimmy Butler contract, it's got to be with the idea that Bam in 2 years is going to be a good deal better and more valuable than Jimmy Butler, that he's going to keep getting better. But you know what a player is within 3 years.
Right. By the way, everyone's pointing out Zach Collins just signed $22 million 3 years with the San Antonio Spurs. So
how much?
The other $22 million for 3 years, which, by the way, that's again.
Yeah, you can't get in that combo with what you got right now.
That's how you know, like
putting stuff together. I'm hey, he got his money though.
Shout out to him. But with regards to your question, Dan, I think the big thing you got to think about is that I've forgotten the question.
Kyle Lowry being in shape, and
I can answer that question.
No, I got
that's perfect. We should just end right there, Mike. I forgot the question.
I have an answer.
No, the Bam Adebayo stuff is concerning because
I have a Bam question. Answer.
Okay, well, you think about it, but I can answer the Kyle Lowry thing. Is yes. Does this guy have arguably the biggest ass in the NBA for sure. But this is a guy that has already reshaped his body once, kinda. And if he's already proven that he can do it once, kinda, then you got to imagine he can do it in a Miami Heat uniform that's going to fit quite snugly around that waist.
Mike, let me tell you right now, they have a body percent limit. They have a weight limit. Famously, my man Bloodsport, James Johnson, was suspended, was not allowed to show up to the practice facility because he didn't meet those limits. Everyone around the league thought this dude was like super overweight, was eating cake all summer, whatever. Turns out the dude was like 0.1% off of his body weight percent limit. He was in incredible shape by anybody's standards, including professional sports, but not by Miami Heat standards. I submit to you that Kyle Lowry will be the first athlete in Miami Heat history to have that just suspended. Hey, look, you know what? We're not going to hold you to it, brother. Just come on in. When it comes to Bam Adebayo, though, Dan, I think here's the thing. What happened to him was this. The stakes rose. It's one thing to be a low lottery guy that's expected to be a beat-em-up, backup big. And instead of saying, oh, he's a starter big. He's actually better than Hassan. That was just cool. And I was like, oh, he can pass the ball. Amazing. When you hit all-star level, and now the game plans, the scouting reports, when we're playing the Miami Heat, are not talking about all these other guys. We're talking about Bam Adebayo. Don't let him get to this spot. Don't let him do this. Don't let him do that. It's an adjustment for a player who's not had that throughout his career, right? Like in a way that someone like, take Tyler Hero very early on has had to deal with people game planning against him. Bam didn't have that early. All of a sudden, it's all on him. So that's a leap. And also, man, like sometimes you begin to believe your press clippings. Sometimes it's just like, yeah, man, I'm nice. I'm nice. And then you find out, like, I'm not that nice yet. I'm not concerned about Bam. I think he's great. I think he's someone to build around because I think he's one of the rarest talents we have in this league. But I think also, as the Heat build, they always have to keep in mind what kind of player he is. And unless he starts shooting threes, I'm not saying he needs to, but unless he starts shooting threes, you're always going to have to surround him with three-point shooting. And that's why Duncan Robinson gets $90 million.
I don't need him to shoot threes. I just need him to shoot twos when the defense is giving him that, and he's proven that. The scouting department for the Bucks just watched every post-game interview that the Miami Heat gave after a loss, which is Bam has to be more aggressive. So he needs to finally learn to be aggressive. And there was a moment there where push came to shove, and we all realized together, oh shit, Bam doesn't have this in him in this moment.
I mean, again, like you got to think Bam and AAU played with Dennis Smith Jr., who was a monster, right? Bam at Kentucky was just like a kind of guy that was here to support the bigger name guys. Bam early in Miami was just happy to get some minutes off the bench behind Hassan Whiteside. So you're asking a guy who really, like, for most of his real meaningful basketball career, has never had to be the guy.
I mean, if I may,
to be the guy, it's a learning. Go ahead.
No, what I'm going to say is the moves today of Riley's last big swing, none of them can work unless Bam Adebayo makes a leap. It can't be Bam Adebayo's been what he is, and he's going to be versatile, and we're going to be talking for months about he's got to be more aggressive. He's got to develop a mid-range game, and he has to do something. He's not going to get to where Giannis is, but it wasn't but 12 months ago that we were saying Giannis might come to the Heat because he's got no answers for Bam. Giannis developed as a player. Bam has to as well.
He has mid-range game, except when he has to think about it and have his team depend on it.
Bam has developed as a player. Absolutely.
100%.
Let's not take that away from him. But what I'm going to tell you, Dan, is
he's got to be their best player. I mean, he's got to be
Dan,
this is what they think
let me
it
tell
is.
you a story.
You're out of order.
Dan, let me tell you a story about Jimmy Butler, okay? Jimmy Butler, unheralded high school player. Jimmy Butler, JUCO. Jimmy Butler goes to Marquette and is not even like the top 3 player there. Jimmy Butler, drafted 30th overall in Chicago. Jimmy Butler, expected just to be a 3-and-D guy. Jimmy Butler works his way up. He's getting better. Oh, this Jimmy Butler guy's pretty good. Jimmy Butler, Derrick Rose leaves, Pau Gasol leaves, Joakim Noah leaves. Jimmy Butler, all-star. Jimmy Butler terrible in the moment of being a leader and stepping up in the moment. That summer, Jimmy Butler comes on the jump. Before he goes in the jump, he comes in the green room. I go in the green room. It's Jimmy. It's two of his guys. It's Tracy McGrady. And we're talking, and it's all small talk, and everything's cool, and nothing really, really insightful. Steven Jackson walks in. He's got his lunch in a plastic bag, and he comes in just telling the story about, oh, my God.
Not a lunch pail. I always thought that dude was the type of dude to bring a lunch pail.
It was to go. He got it to go from wherever he went.
Wait a minute, he walked in with just a bag with a sandwich in it?
No, it was like one of those styrofoam deals that has like the food in it. So he walks in and like, oh man, you wouldn't believe how long it took me to get this food. And I told the dude, da 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 da. And then he turns and he notices Jimmy Butler for the first time. And he says, man, why are they always fucking with you in Chicago? You're better than this. Da, 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 da. And then Jimmy and Steven Jackson begin to have, because Steven Jackson is the most open person I've ever met in my entire life. I've never met another human being who is more willing to tell you about their flaws, not in a proud way. Then I did this, and they said what, but in a remorseful way, but not like also crying sad. Just like matter of factly, I was an idiot when I was young, but then I learned later. And he does this whole speech, and Jimmy's just sitting there listening. So we go out onto the set, and Jimmy Butler's there, and Rachel says, "What's something you need to improve on?" And most people in this moment, most NBA players, most athletes will say, I think I just need to be more consistent. I need to be more. Jimmy Butler says, well, for me, I need to get better at being a leader because I've never been a leader before in my life. And this was my first time, and I don't think I was very good at it. And it was the single most self-aware thing I've ever heard an athlete say in an interview setting, on TV, on the record, live. And I was so shocked. I texted his agent. I said, what the hell? And he said, that's him. And so I still believe that's because Steven Jackson was just the most realist person in the world, and Jimmy Butler felt comfortable enough to be that. But I stand here, I say this story to tell you that once upon a time, Jimmy Butler, even when he was an all-star, wasn't who he is today. And so for Bam, he isn't what he needed to be last year in the playoffs or this past playoffs, but give him time. He'll get there.
But he's got to, Mike, wouldn't you agree that however it is that we're analyzing this, as the country at large maybe is laughing at the Miami Heat, really, you're going to go at this, you're going to go at the Nets with Kyle Lowry. The bet that you're making by building it for the next 2.5 years is that you are going to get a leap from Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. If I had said that to you 12 months ago, while they were in the finals, you guys would be saying, yes, they need a leap from those two guys as Tyler Hero is scoring 37. It's still the same bet they just made today. They're making the bet that not only that these guys will make them a little bit better, but that Bam and Tyler Hero will make
Dan, we saw Jimmy Butler get to within 2 games of an NBA championship, fueled by nothing but coffee and the desire to prove people wrong. The Miami Heat have a type. Bam Adebayo fits that. That was a great story you told just now, Amin. You could say the same thing about Kyle Lowry. You could say the same thing about DeMar DeRozan. You could say the same thing about Kawhi Leonard. And the Miami Heat have a culture, and it's not hard to figure out why they've zeroed in on some of these guys. It is hard to figure out how Tyler Hero fits in all of it.
It's a culture. It's not necessarily a time machine, though. And that's the only concern I have. These guys, if they were in their prime, I'd feel great. But they're not quite in their prime. And that's the part that's a little scary.
They lost Trevor Ariza. He's going to the Lakers. Reporting hit.
They lost Iguodala, too. That's enough of the crafty old dudes that can't shoot from the outside. Although Iguodala would surprise you occasionally.
Oh, they love those. Jay Crowder, Dan Marley. They love
too many of them.
They're going to add, Mike, I assure you that at the trade deadline next year, they're going to add some crafty guy who shoots threes, and it's long and defends. They've done it. They've done it. They do it all the time.
Well, if you're from Miami, certainly you like the way that this ended. If you're from the nation, you're like me, a little disappointed in the lack of movement. I think Lonzo Ball was the biggest surprise that we got today.
Oh, that was a surprise. What was a surprise? We all heard he was going to Chicago.
I mean,
the fact that
85 million.
Okay, because I haven't been checking Twitter in about 20 minutes now because now the liquor's really hitting me. Lauri Markkanen, has he gone anywhere? If he hasn't gone anywhere, that's my next because Zach Collins is gone. Mike, how do you feel about Lauri Markkanen?
I love Lauri Markkanen.
Yeah. I love him too. I think he would be awesome in a situation where he's not playing for a losing team.
Rob Pelinka is doing it, shopping at the bargain bin with the purple and gold and LA lights, drawing people. The man with a golden arm, Wayne Ellington, has agreed to a 1-year deal.
Just going to get a bunch of threes.
With the Los Angeles Lakers.
It's
problem solved.
It's one of my favorite nicknames. Shout out to my man Eric Reed, man with the golden arm. Although everybody I know hates that nickname.
Mike, it's going to be Tom Haberstroh said that the Lakers were made worse by trading for Russell Westbrook because they got rid of their shooters, and LeBron and Anthony Davis are their best shooters. They are going to surround their big three with nothing but shooters. Am I right? Like they're going to go in the bargain bin and just get a bunch of floor spreaders, correct?
I'm so happy that like the next morning after we did that show, we're like, I don't know about this. Starting on Friday and all throughout this weekend, I have about faced on that Russell Westbrook take. This is me planting the seeds, Dan, for a year from now. If the Lakers win the championship, I'm gonna be there like I told y'all from the very beginning, from Friday after that deal happened. I told y'all.
All right. Well, with that,
I wanted
Amin wanting to prove people.
I want it stated for the record that both of you ended 2 hours of free agent talk by punctuating this with "I love Lauri Markkanen." And by the way, I enjoy his game as well. And I love
three dudes that love Lauri Markkanen.
By the way,
look at us.
Does Lauri Markkanen sound like the admin in accounting who always brings baked goods? Like, oh, you know what, man? Thanks, Lauri.
Yeah.
The only thing we can agree on in America these days, do you love Lauri Markkanen? And the answer is yes, America. The answer is yes.
Three dudes that love Lauri Markkanen. What a real positive vibe to end all of this. It was good hanging with you. Unfortunately, the NBA hasn't been wild just yet, but Kawhi Leonard is still out there. Will we spring into action at midnight because Kawhi Leonard signed a Supermax deal with the Los Angeles Lakers somehow? Possibly. Who knows? He's that crazy. And he might be crazy enough to do it. Thank you guys for watching. And if you were late arriving to this, just know the entire video will stay uploaded here on our YouTube page, the Batard and Friends Network. And for those who listen on the podcast and are just checking us out on their Twitter app or whatever reason, it'll be posted to the podcast feed too as tomorrow's local hours. So thank you guys for watching.
And they'll bleep out the fucks I said earlier.
You said another one.